All right, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Doyle, and this is your superior self.
Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to come hang out and talk about the law of attraction, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. So some may recognize you from The Secret. How many times a day do you get, or maybe not a day, but how many times do you get recognized for that?
Zero time. First of all, I mean, it was 15 years ago. I do look a little different. I got a few more lines on my face, but it was actually never anything. I think I got recognized once in a grocery store, and it was somebody who knew me already from something else. She goes, "I recognize you," and it's not just from the movie. So I got the credit for the movie, but that wasn't the original. So I don't know. It's just one of those things.
All right, how did you even get involved in that? Like, how did that even come about?
So I'd been teaching law of attraction principles with my own online program for a few years. And now, originally, my career aspirations were broadcasting, and so I was in radio for 7 years. And my career trajectory was, voiceover and radio and just being a goofball. So I did that for about 7 years, and then I was in Atlanta. So it was it was a major market, and I was low on the totem pole. And I just didn't have the creative freedom that I wanted to have as a creator back then. So I started just jumping around from career to career, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life. And because nothing was really working, and I felt like it should have, that's when I started looking at, well, maybe there's sort of this invisible reason why this isn't working for me. That's what got me started down the whole law of attraction road and creating your own reality and that whole conversation. So I'd been teaching those principles. I mean, my aha moments around that are a whole other story, but let's just jump from, I was teaching it. And my voice in the conversation was always sort of just practical, because after all, I was a broadcaster. I was not a woo-woo guy. I was not a personal development professional. I didn't have this track record and all the lingo. And I was just talking about the law of attraction from a scientific point of view as much as we could do with today's science. And I think so when The Secret came about, when Rhonda Byrne, who created The Secret, started looking around for people to talk about the law of attraction, my guess is she just wanted that voice. She had maybe some woo-woo people. She had this, she had different types of people, and she just wanted, she liked my voice in my Wealth Beyond Reason program. She liked just sort of the straight laid on the line, no nonsense approach. And so that's how it happened. She just found me on the internet.
Well, I read some of your stuff on the internet, but the story that caught my eye was like the corporate guy who was not happy or fulfilled in his job, and was having maybe a fat paycheck, but just and spiritually was not, or even like in their life, not really having that happiness. So for you, like you talked about like a whole different story about how you came into this. I want to know about that story.
Okay,
like, how did you get into that?
That's fine. I wasn't sure if you wanted that level of detail. So,
Oh yeah.
So because I was searching around, trying to figure out what to do with my life professionally, really what I was looking for was a way that I could express myself creatively, which I feel is what drives most people. And when they are not able to express what's inside them creatively, and I'm not just talking about, the arts, but just anything that they create in their mind, want to create in the world, if they're not able to do it for some reason, that's when I really feel that depression, frustration, and anger, resentment, all those negative feelings kind of start to set in. And that was definitely what was happening for me. And so, I got to a point in my corporate job where, like you said, I was making good money, but I still couldn't get myself out of debt. And it was as if I wasn't making good money and I wasn't enjoying it. Right. So there was no creativity in it anymore. So I just sort of quit without any sort of safety net. It's not something I would recommend people do, because there was a very dark, scary summer where I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And that's when I was just heads down into all of this stuff about meditation and visualization and, starting quantum physics and all of those things. Like, why isn't my life working? What's going on that I can't see that is causing this? And so eventually I was led to this book that I later made a part of my original program called A Happy Pocket Full of Money, which talked about sort of the quantum physics in more layman's terms, but the quantum physics of our thoughts and the energy of our thoughts. And what I got out of that was really, I was able to be brutally honest with myself about what my beliefs were really about money and success, which were, money is hard to come by. You're always going to be in debt. And it doesn't matter if you like your job or not. You just got to go work, because that's what I saw my mom do. right? So as children, this is how I was wired. And my whole conversation now is about wiring, right? Our brain wiring, even more than how the law of attraction works. And I'll explain that why in a bit, I'm sure. But though when those lights went on for me, I just started to change some fundamental things I was telling myself about money and success. But also I did all the law of attraction-y things, like my version of a vision board was to change my background wallpaper on my computer to a piece of exercise equipment and a car and these types of things that I wanted to manifest into my life and just sort of test this whole thing. And when those things started happening, that's when I got excited. Now, in my research on what am I going to do with my life, I learned a bit about network marketing, and I had gone through a period where I was very passionate about fitness. And so I'd created a website, I'd created something of a community. So I was not inexperienced on putting programs together. So I just put a program together around what I was learning. And so I was sort of just facilitating this information. But soon after I put it out there as the facilitator, I wasn't claiming to be really any expert, more just like, hey, look at all this cool stuff I found. But as it got deeper into me, and I just sort of felt this calling, if you will, but I mean, I really changed my definition of who I was in this conversation. And rather than being somebody who's just sort of casually putting this stuff together and hoping one day I'll be something, I made a decision, and this is core to my message now, that who I was in this conversation was someone who could effectively communicate these principles to as many willing, open minds as possible. And that was very specific because I had played with people who wanted to fight about it and wanted me to prove this, and just, all sorts of time derailed on, well, what about this? What about that? I wanted to teach people who were ready to learn. And so that's what I did. And when I made that decision, that's when the program went from being 5 ebooks that I had basically, what was the word, curated, right? And a couple of audios that I produced based on what I'd learned, to this massive sort of encyclopedia of wealth beyond reason. Law of attraction information, because I just started getting these downloads. It was just like, once I decided this is who I am, the information that was coming to me was different. And so the program just exploded. And then that's why I think when Rhonda Byrne found it, she was like, oh my God, this guy and all this information and all these resources. I think that had a big part to play, because I had approached it from every conceivable angle, or so I thought at that time, and felt like I was pretty much the definitive resource on practical law of attraction stuff. There was plenty of stuff coming out, especially after The Secret, that was very woo-woo and very magical thinking, which caused a ton of problems. But I tried to stay right there in the middle and practical. But that's kind of my journey to, to how this all happened.
So you talk about the downloads, right? Like, so when were the downloads coming to you? Were you like meditating on it and the information was flowing to you?
It wasn't as formal as that. Honestly, I sat down to write and it came. Like, it was that was sort of my meditation. I think people probably know that feeling of when
flow states, right?
Yeah, it was just nothing but flow states for months whenever I sat down to write. And it was very often this, like, where did that come from? Where'd that come from? Now, the law of attraction is known for having people in the industry who channel, give names to themselves, all of that stuff. And that's not who I am, but I definitely acknowledge that we are part of this infinite ocean of energy called the universe. And we can access a lot of information if we open ourselves up to it. And I don't consider it magical or woo-woo or gifted or out there or anything. It just is. And that's pretty much my contention on all of this, is that all of this stuff that people are calling woo-woo is really just science that isn't mainstream. And you have to dig a little deeper. Yeah, it was just basically flow states.
Yeah, well, like yoga, right? It wasn't mainstream for a long time. Now it's mainstream, and everybody, carries a mat with them everywhere they go.
That's
Law
right.
of attraction, like, so, I think like 2 years ago, I just kind of couldn't get behind it because of like the traditional guys with their vision boards with Ferraris and things on it. And I was like, man, that shit's not, like, I don't know. But the more that I think about the physics of it, right, what you're talking about, the more that I'm realizing, the energy that is in the universe and what's inside of us, right? Like that we would attract things that are like us, that are similar. Like if you take a camera and you keep coming in, taking an inward picture of myself, and you go down even further, you see the cells, and then in the cells there's atoms, and in the atoms there's photons, and in the photons are energy, right? And you think outside of my reality is the same thing. At the very basis of that, it is all energy. So, right, like attracts like you're talking about, right? Energy, same type of energy that I'm putting out in the world is going to be flowing back to me. And I like the way that you put it in reading your website. I like the small clip that I watched. I like that. I think what's frustrating is some of the resistance that I have just from my conditioning. Like you were talking about growing up and having some of those limiting beliefs about, is this really accurate? Is this something that can actually happen? And then when little things pop up, like I do now practice some of what is his name? Neville Goddard stuff, right? And it's frustrating sometimes because you put a lot of energy into it. And then you'll see little things pop up. Like I'm not gonna. People on the podcast know this already, so I'm not embarrassed to say it. Right? Like I want Matthew McConaughey to come on my show, right? So I'll have visualizations of me having an interview with Matthew McConaughey, and the closest thing that I can get is him popping up on my Instagram stories of him doing another interview on another podcast. So it's like, you get what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. So here's why I have shifted over the past couple of years from teaching straight up law of attraction principles and all of that stuff to neuroplasticity and brain science and the fact that we can change our brain. And it is because, so almost 20 years I've been teaching this stuff, and people are so hung up on trying to figure out how the law of attraction works and how's my vision board and what's my vibration and what's about the energy. And they're looking so much at that they're not paying attention to what's really important. And that is, who are they going to be so that they can take the action that will get them the results that they want in their life, instead of trying to magically make them happen using law of attraction rays. And so I'm not in any way negating the power of the law of attraction, but it's like gravity in that you don't need to think about it so much. And what's happening is people are freaking obsessing over it. Books, programs, movies, more movies, more movies. We don't have that stuff about gravity because it's not necessary. What makes the law of attraction work the way we want it is us being consistently the person we want to be, a person who will get the results that are congruent and in alignment with the person who will get, who will attract the money, who will attract whatever it is that they want. But what so many people are trying to do is they're just trying to stay who they are and make the universe create stuff magically, right? Without changing or without taking specific action. Now, not everybody's like that who's in the law of attraction conversation, certainly, but many people are. And what I really realized is, and look, I mean, I've led the charge on understanding the law of attraction. My idea for years was that if you just understood how it worked and that it's a thing, then it would work for you. Well, what I'm realizing is that just not everybody's going to get it. And there's so much resistance to, the invisible part of it. And all of it is unnecessary to understand. All you really need to know, and because look, this is a whole thing about transformation. People are interested in the law of attraction because they want to change their lives. But what they're not getting is to change their life, they have to change. Okay. And so if they spend all their time trying to get all of that to change, that's when they get frustrated or inconsistent results and all of these things. There's no magic to it. The universe isn't out to get you. And it certainly isn't that the universe doesn't want it for you if you don't get it. That's this prevalent thought process. In overall, the mindset of a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of the people who follow the law of attraction, certainly if they've followed it for 5 years or more and still aren't where they are, this is the problem. They're spending so much time trying to figure it out and get it right, worrying about whether they're getting it wrong and go to this event and read this book. It's like, who do you want to be? Let's start being that. So the work that I do with people now is about determining who they want to be, what the gap is between who they're being now and who they want to be or need to be in order to get the life they want. And I have found that number one, it's way faster. Transformation happens almost immediately when people learn to catch themselves and change their autopilot behavior, because that's what this is all about, is our wiring. And the law of attraction stuff just works without them thinking about it.
Well, let's for you, right? Like, what is it that you're trying to be, or what is it that you're in pursuit of?
Yeah, so I have several things going. There's Bob Doyle in this law of attraction / personal development space. And right now, my job in this, my goal, my passion, my drive, the thing I'm most excited about is teaching people that they can change their brain, and showing them exactly how to do it, to figure out exactly what they need to do. what the behaviors they need to take on, what practices, what stories they need to give up, because that's a huge part of it. So that's one segment of my life. But I'm also a voiceover artist, and I also play the ukulele, and I'm also wildly passionate about artificial intelligence when it comes to faces and things like that. I mean, I have so many various areas of interest, and my goal is to pursue them all to some extent before I die. You know, and some of them will provide revenue and an income, and some of them will just provide quality of life and me knowing I am me and doing the thing I'm here to do. You know, the problem with a lot of people is they get so stuck on trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with their life, like what's my purpose, who am I supposed to be, and they'll think about things that they are passionate about, but they go, well, I can't figure out how to make money with it, as if that's the rule, like it's all about money. Well, it's not. And sometimes just following what's in you, whether or not you have money or not, will lead you to the thing that will bring you your great abundance or whatever. You need to follow what's in there, because if you don't, you're cheating the world of whatever value you have in that area, number one. But you're never going to feel that sense of happiness. It doesn't matter how much money you have or any of it, if you're not being the person that is inside you to be.
I love that. Like you said, there's a lot of literature out there about the law of attraction, right? And has your message changed since The Secret?
Yeah, it has. Like, stop freaking obsessing about the law of attraction. So what happened post Secret was, all the way up until that point, the people who were taking my program were all on board. You know, they knew it was a law of attraction program. They signed up, they got their results, they're happy. And when The Secret came out, everybody who first saw The Secret were the people who were basically on the email lists of everyone who was in the movie, right? We all mailed our people, we're a part of this great project, got to see it, right? And so millions of people saw it who were already pretty much in the conversation and loved it, right? They were like, yes, I love this. And then they started looking at their friends and family and they said, you need to see this. You need to see this. You need to see this. Nobody likes that, number one, because it assumes that you're telling them there's a problem. And then not everybody's going to be on board with this whole we attract our circumstances thing. And that's what happened. A lot of people, I didn't attract this, I didn't attract that. That's a bunch of nonsense. You're all about the money, blah, blah, blah. Just a bunch of stuff that happened as a result of people seeing this film who were what I refer to as muggles, right? People who are not in the conversation. And so my career changed from enthusiastically teaching these principles and showing people all this stuff to dispelling a bunch of myths that came out as a result of people misinterpreting The Secret. Now, I'm the first to say, yeah, there was a genie in that movie and there was a kid who drew a bike and then the door opened and there it was. Like, I totally get why people took away some of this magical thinking stuff, but that's not how it works. It's not how transformation works. I am in the transformation business, not the magic business. I'm here to help people become the person they want to become so that they can have the life they want. And when they do that consistently, all their energy and their vibration, all that stuff, it's just going to happen. It's when you try to make your vibration this way and you're obsessed over it, and then you think, oh no, I had a negative thought, you know. It's okay. Negative thoughts are part of the whole spectrum of emotion that we were born with. We have this incredible reality creation machine in our brain. And part of that is experiencing emotion. It's our guide. It shows us that we're on the path that we should be on or we're not. But a lot of people get stuck in the negative, right? And they dwell on it and they ruminate over it. And they get wired to be negative. They get wired to think negatively. I was that. I grew up wired to be a skeptic and to think about what is going to go wrong before it goes right, because that's what I saw. And this is what happens with everybody. We're born and our brains are wide open and we just say yes to everything. And our brains, we grow these neural pathways and they become the lens through which we see the world. It's our truth, not the truth, not the truth of the neighbor across the street or anybody else's. We may share some ideas of truth, but there are certainly going to be times, and we see it all the time now, where people can be looking at the exact same set of circumstances and having completely different interpretations of what's true about it. And so there is no truth, and that's freedom. So if your reality, if the truth that you're seeing through the world isn't serving you, if you're not happy, if you're just feeling frustrated, if you're feeling disempowered, it is because your wiring is causing you to create meaning that gives you those feelings. But that meaning is all driven by the wiring, which the good news is it can be changed when you become conscious of it. And that's what I help people do.
Without giving away the store, like how can we change?
I'm happy to give away the store. So first of all, the very first skill set I am teaching people is to catch themselves when they're in autopilot, which is almost all the time. I would wager to say that most people in the world today have no free will whatsoever, and they believe that they do. Because when you think about free will, you think, well, I made this choice. I consciously made this choice. Well, what made you make that choice? What set of circumstances, what belief system, what made you choose that over this? And I guarantee you it's wiring, most of which was unconscious. So you think you're making a conscious decision, to not take that job or to go over here or to whatever. But it's really just the natural result, the autopilot result of a bunch of wiring that is unconscious that happens so fast you don't even know it. So the skill set is to look at your decisions and be able to stop and realize when you are in autopilot mode. Now, this is only an issue when you're disempowered, when your wiring is stopping you from progressing. So what I advise people to do when they're starting with this, because the first question is, well, how do I even begin? Is to just, as you go through your day, notice when you have that disempowered feeling, when you get angry or when you get sad or when you get worried, anything that isn't how you want to feel, and then stop and go into what I call observation mode. It's sort of just kind of lifting yourself out of the moment and observing it from this place of pure consciousness, without judgment, without time, without age, without any of it. And just observing so that you can sort of see, wow, this is what I do every time in this situation. And maybe you know why you do it, maybe you don't. But what you do know is that this is an autopilot behavior that happens automatically that does not get you where you want to go. So at first, this is difficult. It gets easier to catch yourself. But the mantra is, this is not the truth. This is my wiring. So when you can look at that and realize that what I'm doing right now is autopilot, it's not necessarily in my best interest. What else could I do? Now, here's the thing. In the moment, you're probably going to be in upset and your body's going to be flooded with hormones and chemicals. And it's going to be very difficult to override that, right? I mean, we've all been in situations where, I wish I could just change my mood, but you're in momentum, that emotional momentum. So part of what I do with people to help them is use this, to teach them to use this brain of theirs in the morning and in the evenings to do what it's meant to do, to create. Who do you want to be? So at the beginning of a day, if you've got a situation where that, this is a situation where sometimes I get triggered or I behave in a way that I don't like, whatever. And it can look a million different ways. Before you even go out in your day, before you get out of bed, you can use this brain to rehearse that situation as the person you want to be, with the characteristics you want to be, with the empowerment that you want to have, saying the things you really feel, the things you want to be. Rehearse, because your brain doesn't know really that you're just rehearsing. Your subconscious is just going, okay, we're doing this. And when you do that with emotion on a repeated basis, it's just how we learn everything, except that we're doing it unconsciously. We're sending ourselves the same stuff all the time, which is why our reality persists. But it's all on autopilot. So we're trying to be now conscious and saying, no, instead of this, I'm going to behave like this. So you rehearse it, you feel it, so that the next time that situation happens, you've got a variety of ways that you've rehearsed that you could respond. And not only are you sort of just rehearsing it, it's in your head, but the more you do it with emotion, you're actually going to begin to create new neural pathways. When the neural pathways are formed, that's when all of this stuff becomes your new autopilot. The reason that everything you're doing now on autopilot is because you've got these really strong neural pathways. They've been growing your whole life. And that's why transformation doesn't happen necessarily in 24 hours, 3 days, 7 days, 14 days, or 90 days. That's all freaking hyperbole from the freaking personal development industry, which has made this so difficult for people because they have unrealistic expectations and they compare themselves. They read somebody's testimonial. Wow, they saw The Secret and in a week they had a car. Their wiring is their wiring. They were out in the world a way that's different than the way you're out in the world. You can't compare yourself with others except to be inspired by them. If you see somebody do something amazing and you go, that's what I want to do, that's some behavior I'd like to emulate, then yes, absolutely go for it. But you don't look at someone else's success and go, that could never happen to me. That's not fair. Why did it happen to them? I've been working on this 3 years. You've got different wiring. And if you haven't been working on your wiring, it's no wonder you're on autopilot. It's okay. Coaching so many people over 20 years who beat themselves up because they've been studying this for so long and they still can't get it. I should know better than to do this. I'm like, every time you do that, you solidify that neural pathway that there's something wrong with you and that this doesn't work. And that, of course, is going to be your truth. And of course, you're going to act in alignment with that. That's just how it is. Again, no magic, no metaphysics, no woo-woo, no faith in anything. It's just brain science. This is what I love about teaching it this way instead of the law of attraction, because people want to debate the law of attraction all day. You don't debate neuroplasticity. You don't debate the fact that we learn and that our brain changes. This is just plain science. Our brain changes all the time. Every time we learn a new concept, we begin to change our brain. So we're just learning how to be a different version of ourselves, just like we would learn to walk or talk or a new recipe, with all the mistakes and the feedback that we get. That when we fall down or we get it wrong, we just keep going. Why? Because it's non-negotiable. So when we can make our transformation and the results we want to have in the world non-negotiable and not something that just would be kind of cool to test the law of attraction, but no, I must be this because I got this to do in the world and it's going to have this impact. And I don't care how many times I get feedback, which other people call failure. I'm going to just keep going. I'm going to take that feedback. I'm going to learn from it, adjust the course, and keep going because this is non-negotiable. If it's not that, as non-negotiable as walking was, I mean, you must have fallen hundreds of times walking, learning to walk, stumbling over words, learning to talk and learning to write, and so many mistakes. And yet you kept going until you got it. But somehow with personal development, we go, well, I tried twice. I solved the secret 100 times. It's obviously a bunch of nonsense because I tried the thing and it didn't work. And so we would have nothing in the world if everybody thought about, invention and technology and progress the way we think about our own personal development.
I love that. So we get to a point where we recondition the brain, or we change our neural pathways, right? And we start getting rid of some of the programming that we've grown into or were taught at an early age. We start becoming that person that we want to become. Is it then that you start noticing, or maybe realizing the things that you wanted are starting to attract to you more? Is that when that happens?
Well, yes, but it's logical because you're taking different action, which is in alignment. You have a very specific intention and you've imagined how this person, what this person would have to do, what they would have to say, the meaning they would have to make, the stories they'd have to give, all of these things to move towards that. So as you take action that is different than you've ever taken before, then of course you're going to get different results. And if the action is set with the intention of getting to this particular place, then of course you're going to get closer to it as you move forward. Now, having said all of that, a lot of times this journey means you get 2 or 3 steps down and then something else opens up and you go, oh, okay, no, that's it. But you couldn't have seen that bigger picture for yourself unless you did the first steps, right? Like people will think small, for example, I'm going to create a company with 5 employees and I'm going to, whatever. And then by the time they get to a certain point in their journey, they realize, no, this is a 100-person company and it's going to be in, that kind of thing. And they just grow and expand, but they couldn't have made that leap from the beginning because it would have been too big and impossible. And they would have had so much resistance that they wouldn't have even begun to take the action because it would have seemed too big.
Sure. No, absolutely. So a couple of questions here, right? So I'm very interested in hearing your philosophy on it. Like, I'm curious, like out of the woohoo guys and gals, like which one do you kind of look at their modality and say, it's probably the closest thing to mine?
Out of the woo-woo people?
Yeah. What do you consider? How do you consider
zero woo-woo in my program now? Zero.
Who do you consider woo-woo? Like who?
Let's talk. Well, we can talk about Abraham.
Okay.
I mean, that's channeling. That's straight up channeling, and that's what they say, and it's a lot of pure law of attraction stuff, and it's what a lot of the people cling to. Like, I'm just going to stay this positive, or I'm going to do, the things that Abraham said, and I'm not anti-Abraham either. I think that some of their stuff is some of the greatest law of attraction principles out there. The problem is people are complicating it and still trying to keep it magical and not taking it into the practical step. Sure. So it's, these people they'll post the Abraham quotes, they'll post the videos, they'll post the memes, they'll post all of this wonderful stuff from all the woo-woo people and still talk about how they're not there yet. I know it's coming, right? But what are you doing?
Yeah.
Who are you being that's different? You can't just keep being the same person. And a lot of people, they just are.
What about imagining? Well, I guess it's the same thing, right? Like imagining the person that you want to be, right? Like Neville Goddard, right? What are your thoughts on him?
Great. That the Goddard stuff is amazing. I really, really love it. It goes in lots of odd directions if you really dig deep. But some of the basic stuff, the feeling stuff, the feeling is the secret, all of these things, I love it all. I really do. And there's still a practical outcome from doing the things they say. Mm-hmm. All of those books, like this, here, the book that flipped the switch for me, that got me on this track, was actually me rereading The Science of Getting Rich. It's 100 years old, Wallace D. Wattles. They don't talk about neuroplasticity or brain change or any of that stuff in there, but what they do talk about is the importance of being, right? And the impression of increase, all these things. Who are you going to be out in the world? And that you do not have the this is one of my big takeaways. This is my paraphrasing of the takeaway, is that you do not have the luxury of basking in negative thinking. People do it, right? They get in a place and they just go, oh, I'm just in it. I'm just in it. I'm just in it. And they cycle the same negative story because they get to be right about it. And boy, oh boy, do we love to be right, even if it means that our life is crap. See, I told you I'd never get it. So there's this part of our brain that likes that. Yeah, see, I was right. I knew I'd never amount to anything. It's highly addictive, but of course it's a trap, and to start to tell yourself something different when you've been telling yourself that it's not going to happen for you in one way or the other, just change that conversation to the opposite is a major and radical change of gears. It feels completely unnatural. It feels like you're lying to yourself. It's hard. It's like physically hard to do. Mm-hmm. But when you know why you're doing it and who you're going to be and what you're going to receive as a result, and when you have the support, because look, here's the thing we haven't said, trying to do this by yourself is almost impossible because you are up against your own wiring. And once you reach the limits of it, and whether you make $1 million a year, 5 million, none of that matters. At some point, you're going to reach the limit of your wiring, whatever that is. And if you don't have somebody to help reframe what's true about your potential at that point, you'll stop because you can't, you're at the end. So you're not seeing any new information. You don't see new possibility if you're not conscious of the fact that you can consciously choose that. So having a support system, some sort of coach in some place, tools, we have all these amazing, one of the things that is great that came out of so much attention on the law of attraction is this whole slew of what is called release techniques. These are processes, things like emotional freedom technique, which is tapping along the meridians along your body. There's the Sedona method, which was created by somebody who was also in The Secret, Hal Dwoskin. It's just a series of 3 questions you ask yourself. There's a whole collection that I share with all of my students to help them through the emotion that comes up when you go through this transformation. Because when you hit that wiring, that's when you're going to hit the frustration or the fear or the worry or all that very natural, normal, to be expected stuff. But people make it mean that they can't do it. It's actually, when you get to that point, that's congratulations. You should be celebrating it because now you're ready to grow. If you've been comfortable all this time, then there's no growth. Growth comes from the discomfort that comes with this. So you should celebrate it.
Sure. Lester Levinson, is he the one that did the Sedona method? So
right. And Hal Dwoskin has taken over, basically. Yes.
What are the 3 questions? Are you aware? Is that something like that?
Could I let this go? So these are the 3 questions that if you, and actually once you practice this for a while, you don't even need to ask the 3. But in any time of an upset, all you have to do is ask yourself, could I let this go? And by the way, it doesn't matter if you say yes or no. Just, could I let this go? Now, my logical brain goes, well, of course I could. I mean, it's just an upset. I know that I could distract myself. But anyway, you answer that question. Then the next question is, would I let this go? Because there's lots of people who, like I say, they cling to their stories. The whole story thing is really important because it's so much of our identity. And when people have to give up old stories, they give up a piece of their identity. And that's like falling into a void if they haven't figured out where they're going to go on the other side. The third question is, so you say, could I let this go? Would I let this go? The third one is, when? And just in that inquiry, the release can come, unless you try to complicate it. It took me I'll tell you what, it took me a while to get the Sedona method to work because I was wanting it to be more complicated. It was when I sat in the audience of Hale working with people. And all he was at that point, he would have them, what's your upset, whatever, share. And he'd just look at them in his Hale way. I don't know if you've ever talked to him or seen him, but he's got a very unique presence. And he just goes, could you let that go? And that's it. And I just watched it just go away. So the Sedona method is really awesome. And it's one of those anywhere, anytime kind of things. EFT is a little bit more, it involves tapping. And sometimes people don't want to do that in public or whatever. They find a covert way to do it. In my experience, having worked with many, many release techniques, whether it's EFT, Sedona method, and others, you learn to feel what release feels like. It's a natural state. It's a natural ability that we're born with. We weren't born needing to learn techniques. We weren't born needing to learn about the law of attraction. We weren't born needing to learn any of this stuff. We're born to create, and we were born with everything we needed. It wasn't until thoughts of limitation and what we couldn't do and wiring came in, then we programmed this organ with infinite potential to be really limited. And so, but that's not everybody. We can see there are people out in the world who have taken this thing a long way past other people, but we've all got this brain, and save for, genetic defects and that type of thing, like actual damage, most people have the same amount of potential, but they're not feeding this brain with the right information, the right thoughts, the right feelings, the right inspiration, to actually take the action necessary. So they just wire themselves with whatever environment they're in. That's why it's so critical that you pay attention to who you hang out with and what they think about, because all of it is wiring you, which is creating your truth. It's huge. This is not it's not insignificant. The people you hang out with, the places you go, the thoughts, the movies you watch, the books you read, it's all super important. This idea that TV doesn't really affect you is so much nonsense, because you're in an alpha state. You're totally open to whatever, and it's just coming in, and the images that you see and the things that you hear, they're in there. You're not going to have a brain dump. And so now they all go into this pool of possibility. And what we want our pool of possibility is to be inspired, just achievement and the things that we want. We want to fill our brain with exactly what we want to fill it with to get where we want to go. And if we get lax on that, or start making excuses for, well, it's okay if I do this or do this, and then wonder why we're not getting the results, that's why, again, there's no freaking magic here. Your brain is in control. But the good news is your consciousness can control your brain. It's bigger, right? The essence of who you are. Like when you think about your childhood or whatever, you think about your earliest memories, the one thinking about those memories isn't a 3-year-old. You're watching this, right? From this, like I said before, this sort of ageless consciousness. It's just you. And then there's this body and the brain. It's all been programmed, and it's acting out based on its programming. But you are perfectly capable of stepping out and just sort of observing that and going, well, this isn't working very well. What else could I do? And all you have to do is use the world as an example. If you're not sure who you want to be or what you want, just think about the people who inspire you. What are the traits that inspire you? What's the part of their story that inspires you? What is it that they've accomplished or said or stood for that calls to you? And then what do you need to do to be more like that? Be more like that. What action do you need to take? What meaning do you need to make that's different? If you take anything in your life to make it mean that you can't do something, you have to change that meaning, because it's not true that you can't. Maybe right in that moment, you don't have the skill set or the knowledge or the experience or the connections, but you can get them if you start taking action congruent with the intention of getting them. One of the things that happens, though, and this is bound to come up, is is what happens to the people around you. Because when you start to change and you've been surrounded by this group of people, whoever it is, and it's been attracted completely appropriately based on who you've been being, and you say, no, I'm this. You cannot expect that everybody around you is going to be on board. And in fact, a lot of them will not be. And when they start giving you their opinions, a lot of people stop at that point because they don't want this person. Well, this is my mom, or this is my spouse, or I don't want them to be uncomfortable, or I don't want them to be mad at me, or I don't like it that they're saying I can't do it or whatever. So you just quit. I have a quiz that I give people that when they first come to work with me. It's a transformation personality type quiz. And they fall into 4 different categories. And while there's nothing wrong with any of these types, they each have a trait or two that generally tend to stop them in their transformation / rewiring efforts. And the type I'm talking about there is the people pleaser. And it's the person who's super excited about their transformation up until somebody says they're being an idiot about it. And then they stop. And there are there's 3 other types, and it's all similar stuff. They're all wanting transformation, but then there's something that happens that keeps them from continuing when they hit it can't happen.
So you mentioned The Science of Getting Rich, right? That book. And it's funny because I was just reading that prior to this conversation.
Perfect.
And he talks about, what is it, the brain stuff, right? Or the mind stuff or whatever. I'm trying to remember what he says. I'm looking at it right here. Because that's kind of like what you're talking about, like with physics and the world and the universe, and like we're made up of that. And like I love everything you're about, and I love
and look, Science of Getting Rich, I read it 20 years ago when I first started this work. And when I say I read it, I should say I skimmed it thinking, oh, I see what they're doing here. Like I thought I had it. But when I read it maybe 3 years ago now. But anyway, when I reread it after teaching it the way I've been teaching it for so long, and so many distinctions and so many cases of so many people, and it was a totally different brain reading it now, right? 20 years later. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is all people need to know. And it's true. That book, if you just do that book, you don't even need to know about neuroplasticity. You're just being the person, and it's just going to happen. Sure. There's so much great stuff about there in there about gratitude and so on. And it can seem kind of woo-woo, but again, if you read that book, there's a practical aspect of all of it. And you don't have to believe in magic and take crazy leaps of faith, which is what a lot of people do, because a lot of people are desperate when they come to the law of attraction, or they see The Secret and they go, I need this so bad. I got to change this. And so they just, whatever anybody says that sounds the best, they're just going to believe it, whether or not there's any science to it, whether or not it makes any sense, or whether or not it will do anything. And then of course, if it doesn't result in changing the wiring of your brain, I don't care what the technique is. I don't care if it's Tony Robbins. I don't care if it's the law of attraction or The Secret or any other program or approach. If your brain isn't rewired as a result of you going through it, your transformation will not last because you haven't transformed. Transformed means you changed, right? We want to change at a fundamental level. You don't get much more fundamental than the structure of your brain and how you interpret this onslaught of energy that is the universe.
I love this one saying. He says, man may come into full harmony with the formless substance by entertaining a lively and sincere gratitude for the blessings it bestows upon him. So like goes right back to what you're talking about with gratitude. And then like competitiveness, right? He talks about don't be competitive, right? Like just be you,
creative. Competitive versus creative in business. This is all such great stuff. I mean, everybody can benefit from reading that book, but they just need to read it for what it is. Many people are like, what did he really mean here? Because it's 100 years old. What do they really mean here? And he says it right up front. This is not a book with metaphors and a hidden message or any of that. It's just read it, do it. But we're just so crazy.
Isn't it crazy though? It's over 100. Was it 1910?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. 100 years ago, this guy had this insight.
Yeah. And the language isn't that dated. I mean, there are some examples that are pretty dated and may not apply specifically, but the basic important stuff that he talks about, all the different principles. And here's this is I've never been a person who reads a book multiple times and does the whole dog ear highlight kind of stuff. That's just not me, probably because I hated school so much, you know. But that book, I mean, pages falling out of it that I have to put back in. Lots of dog ears, lots of highlights, lots of underlines, multiple readings. I've got a whole course of me just going through chapter by chapter, breaking down, reading the book and breaking it down, bringing it up to, you know, I guess today's language or whatever with my insights on all this. I mean, this is the book Bob Proctor carries around and has studied for, you know, over 50 years or whatever in his career. It is the book that The Secret was based on. I mean, The Science of Getting Rich is it. A lot of people think it's Think and Grow Rich. It isn't. It's the science of getting rich. It was the impetus for this whole thing.
Bob, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, man. This has been fantastic. How can people find you?
So all things Bob Doyle could be found at meetbobdoyle.com. That's just sort of your general Bob Doyle site. One of the things that I would like to point people to is, and it's not the site, but there's also a URL for it, is the Transformation Personality Type Quiz. And it's tptquiz.com. It's free. It takes a minute. But the reason that is so powerful is it tells you your starting point. It gives you an insight to your current wiring, because knowing what your autopilot is a very important first step to changing it, because you don't know what you don't know, and until you shine a light on it, you just think you're just doing what is. Again, when your wiring just has you see everything you do as the truth and all of that, but when you can identify your wiring by just taking this quiz and going, oh, okay, I'm a people pleaser, or I'm a seeker, or I'm a wizard, or I'm a skeptic, and learning what that means and what you can do about it to get past when you stop. Because there's like I said, there's traits of all of those that generally get them to stop them before they complete the rewiring process. So either one of those, but you can get to the quiz from Meet Bob Doyle too.
Well, who you talk about when you stop, right? You need somebody there to help push you or mentor you or guide you. Who has been your guide or mentor?
I guess I've had several. I had the guy I credit for my biggest shift from looking at this from more of a brain point of view, even before reading Science of Getting Rich, is a guy named Andy Shaw. And he wrote a book called A Bug-Free Mind. It's actually two books, Creating a Bug-Free Mind and Using a Bug-Free Mind. And it's all about just kind of fixing your thinking. And I would consider him something of a mentor. I don't have that many. Like, I don't just like, oh, this guy forever. I've just taken these bits and pieces from people, but there's no one person where I'm like all on board with everything they do, you know. Sure. Just and that's going to be the case for everybody, and it should be that way. Yeah. You know, there's just like not everything's going to resonate or work with the wiring of everybody. So you find whatever works for you to take the action you need to take. That's the one to follow. And it could change. Like next month, it could be somebody else who gets me inspired to take that action.
I love it. Always moving, man. You're like the brain, right? Rewiring itself all the time. So
yes.
Bob, thank you so much for joining, man. This has been awesome.
My pleasure. Anytime.